So it's the last Sunday in January, and it is working out perfectly that I've had this notion of doing the introduction to the Science of Mind textbook and speaking about the 4 stages of that. And this is the last, as I say, the last day in January, so I made it. We're going to talk about the last one, but let me remind you what the first 3 were. We began by talking about the thing itself. And these are Holmes's words, and Ernest Holmes named all of this, so it obviously requires a little description if you weren't here for that talk. The thing itself is that divine presence, that absolute, whole, self-existent cause that is behind everything that is. It's the creative force of the universe. And you got to recognize that there's something there, some level of intelligence that has created all of this. And once we're clear about that, we can go on from there and look at what it does, or the way it works. That's how the second part of the introduction goes, the way it works. And we went there looking at this idea of mind and how there's an objective mind and there's a subjective mind and how those aspects of mind work together. There's really only one mind. It's the mind of this thing we call God. But it has 2 elements to it, and they intersect and work together beautifully, and that's what we talked about in that one. And then the 3rd week, we talked about what it does, and that it is the creative element of everything that is. So we, having a conscious mind, think things that go into subjective mind or impressed upon that subjective mind, which is everywhere, always. And what pops out into our lives is an outcome, is what we call a manifestation or a demonstration that comes from the thoughts and the beliefs that we have. It's pretty simple, but that doesn't mean we always get it and that we always use it. It's a process, and you have to really be conscious of it. I think that's the bottom line here, is that you've got to be conscious that your thinking is making a difference. So as we go into this thing called how to use it, the bottom line of that is you use it by being aware of what your beliefs are and what your thoughts are. Now, do we know instantly what all of our beliefs and thoughts are? No. Often we don't know until they pop out of our mouths or into our minds. But when they do, they're being impressed upon that subjective mind. And we're telling subjective mind that that's what we want, even if we're saying we don't want it, because subjective mind doesn't speak English. It is impressed by our thoughts. So the object of our thoughts is what it takes to create. So if I want to say, I want this pain to go away, the focus of that statement is pain. So what are we going to get more of? Pain, exactly. So it's our job. The law is perfect. The law is absolute. So it's not up to the law to do anything differently. It's up to us to do something differently, to handle this in a different way. And before I get too much further into that, I want to talk about this thing called perfection, which has been something in my mind all along through my years of being in the science of mind, is that I hear people say that they want something to be perfect, as though it's not. But it is. It's already perfect. Everything in life is perfect, and this isn't news. This has been around for a long time, so much so that when Jesus gave his Sermon on the Mount, I'm sure you've all heard of that wonderful declaration he made. He made this statement: "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect." Be ye therefore perfect. Now, he didn't speak Old English, he spoke Aramaic, but that's the way it was translated. So he's saying, be perfect. Get that you're perfect. Now, he says, even as your Father, what he means by that is divine presence. He just happened to call it Father. And interesting, you'll see here, even though in much of Christendom they say that the only Son that God had was Jesus, he's saying it's your Father. Good to know. And then he says, which is in heaven. Which is in heaven. He also taught that the kingdom of heaven is within. So what in essence he's saying with this is, be perfect, just like divine presence is within you. That's what he's saying. And by the way, this particular photograph right here is the place where he is said to have given that sermon. So from that place, Jesus is telling us, this great teacher is telling us all to get that we're perfect and that that's our work. And that's what we're here to do, is to get that we're perfect, that we live in a perfect world that is created through a perfect law. And that when we start understanding that and we let go of the idea that we want to be perfect or we need to be perfect or we are pursuing perfection, we lose the whole game here when we do that. One thing that I teach every one of my practitioner students and have for all these years is that do not treat for perfection, because it's already perfect. It may be a perfect mess, but it's a perfect reflection of consciousness. So there's nothing imperfect about it. So when you treat for it to be perfect, you're actually treating for it to remain the way it is. It doesn't change anything when you don't understand that perfection is everywhere and always. We live in a perfect world. Now, we have things we don't like about this world. And the beauty of that is through consciousness, we can change them. But it's our work to do. It's not that we need something to become perfect. It already is perfect. Holmes wrote something about this that I thought would be helpful. Insofar as our thought is in accord with this perfect law, it will accomplish, and nothing will hinder it. So our thought must be in alignment, in accord with the law. Now, what happens is that the law is working even on the stuff that isn't in alignment with it. Oh, and by the way, yeah, that's a picture of Ernest Holmes when he was quite a bit younger. You don't see that very often. But chances are he was probably looked like that when he wrote this stuff. And you'll notice also that it's all in caps. And that's because he wrote it all in caps. He really wanted us to get this. He wants us to align with the law, to know that it's there, to know that it's taking the impress of every thought and belief that we have and turning that into the experience of our lives. And when we know that, then we have a greater tendency to watch what we're thinking and saying and believing about life. Because when we believe things are bad or hard or wrong, any of that, we'll still experience it just that way. And then we'll go, see, it's still that way, I was right. Yeah, how's that work? This goes very nicely with Barbara's idea of optimism and pessimism, in that the law works perfectly for an optimist as it does for a pessimist. It doesn't care. It absolutely has no preferences. It's just going to give you back, reflect back to you exactly what you give it. So if you're complaining in your life, if you're gossiping in your life, if you're finding fault in the world, that's about you, and that's what you're going to get. So our work is to become ever more conscious. Now, I've heard Barbara give great talks on this, and she says you only have to get to 51%. And that's probably true. But what I want you to know is you don't want 49% of your thoughts to be taking you down, even if 51% are lifting you up. That's too close to struggle for me. So shoot for the stars. Shoot for the whole thing, so that all of your thoughts carry you. I'm not there yet. Maybe some of you are. I'm still working on it. I still have my moments where I grumble. But I'm working on it. And my intention is to move beyond that and to accept life the way it is, no matter what. And I invite you to do the same, to find the God in everything in your life, because it's there. That presence is absolute. It doesn't come and go. It doesn't have empty spots where it is not. It is everywhere always. So if something happens that you don't like, God's in the midst of it. I had one this morning. I got word that the person who was going to take temperatures at the door was not coming. It's my sister-in-law. And I also heard from the person that coordinates that nobody else was coming to do it either. And so I started grumbling, saying, well, I guess I have to do it. So I'm walking around here with the thing, taking people's temperatures, going, I have to do this. I should be doing other things. And then our beloved Devon said, put that down and go do what you have to do. But who's going to do it? See, this is the way thoughts create problems in our lives, because we hold on to the thing that it's not good enough, that it's not working. This is called arguing for your limitations. But when I set it down and stopped worrying about it, I think we had 3 people out there taking temperatures. It was not a problem, except in my mind. And until I let it go, it continued to be a problem. This is how it works. Now, things may not always look like we want them to look. Things may not be unfolding the way we would love for them to unfold in every situation. But the one thing I'm certain of is that God's in the midst of it all, without exception. And that the only way it becomes hard and challenging and struggling is when we worry about it, when we complain about it, when we close down around it. Then we struggle. And then we're miserable. And it's not a wonderful way to be alive. It's not the intended way for us to be. We get caught in the muck and the mire. But as Emerson says, that even in the muck and mire, something sings. Something's God. Something's working. And the job is always to find it. So how do you use this? Well, you use it by taking whatever is before you and owning it, but not finding fault in it. And many of us have had situations in our lives that were really hard. I remember when I had a ruptured disc in my back. I was miserable. But even in the midst of that, one of the most sweet parts of that whole experience was the way Barbara tended to me, the way she fed me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sit up. So I'm laying on my side, and she would put spoonfuls of food in my mouth. It was so beautiful. It was like the sweetest, most loving thing that anyone had ever done for me, because I couldn't do it for myself. And that's always there, even in the hard parts of life. And life continues to be perfect, even when it's hard, even when it's uncertain. And our job is to remain vigilant and steadfast in knowing that God's in the midst of it all. I look out across this group, and I know that a number of you have had times in your life that were hard, where someone close to you died, where you had to pick up the pieces. I know there have been situations where all kinds of challenges faced you, and yet you've worked through them. You're here today. And if you're watching from another place, you've worked through yours too, or you wouldn't be where you are. The truth is that this elegant journey through life, it may be hard, but God's in the midst of it all. And when we remember that, we can get through it, even if we can't see the path. And recently, that's something I've had to work through, is not being able to see the path. So I have a story for you this morning. It's a really important one. And it starts with, I don't know how long ago it was, several months ago. Barbara noticing a lump in her breast. And her sister, the nurse that we so entrust, said, I had that. It's a clogged duct. You're all right. It'll pass. Or if you have to, you go to the doctor and get it drained. And we kind of calmed down around it. But when we went to our primary care physician and told him that it was there, and he examined, he said, you've got to go do a mammogram. And Barbara, at her age, has never done a mammogram. You know, there's lots of positions on mammograms, so it never had happened. But we scheduled it, and we went to a facility. Well, actually, before that, Barbara had great concern because she's known of women that have gone through that procedure, and it was very challenging. They left black and blue, and she's on blood thinners, so all the more concerned. So we resisted a bit, but then finally we went and had the mammogram done. And the way things are now, you can't go everywhere, so I'm out in the lobby waiting for her, and somebody came and got me and brought me in, and there was a technician and a radiologist in the room. And I don't read sonograms and mammograms, but I'm looking, and the radiologist, a gentleman, says, yep, that's cancer. 95% chance that's cancer. But they can't really call it cancer until they do a biopsy. So we scheduled a biopsy and we went back. And they punctured a hole in Barbara. And it was not a pleasant experience at all. And we waited for the response. And when it came, it was cancer. So all I could think to do was call a meeting of our practitioners. And we got them all on a Zoom call. And I explained what I knew, which wasn't much, but that I needed their support. Listen to me, I'm the one that needs it. Barbara's handling this. But I'm saying I need your support because I'm lost in this. And they said, we got you. And they told Barbara, we got you. And they were absolute about it. It was quite wonderful. It was quite amazing. Some of them were so absolutely steadfast in knowing this is nothing. You know, clearer than me in the moment. So the next step after the biopsy is to do CT scans and bone density scans so they can tell if it's anywhere else. So the doctor puts in the order for that, and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And we wait a week and nothing happens. And then I remember in my very first conversation with our primary care physician, the first thing he said to me was he gave me the name of a surgeon. I, of course, rejected this information completely. I wrote it down, but I gave it nothing because I didn't want to deal with a surgeon. Because I didn't know how to do this. So we were waiting, and it occurs to me that the experiences that we had at this place where the mammogram and the biopsy were done was really not resonating with us. And that one of the things Barbara said when we left there was, how is it that men get to do this to women, to tell them about their breasts? I didn't have an answer. But then I remembered the name he had given me was a woman surgeon. Her name is Dr. McAllister. And she's in Henderson County, different county. Now, we've had insurance rejected for doctors in Henderson County. So I'm conflicted as to whether this would even work. But I asked our primary care physician for a referral. He put it in. The next day, their office calls and said, we want you to come right in. Wow, my doctor said that this could take a long time. They say, no, we want you in now. So we went. We went the next day. We still hadn't done the CT scans or the bone density scans, but we went. And when we got there, there's this big glass building, and the only doctor's name on the building is Dr. McAllister. It's like a 3-story building. That's the only name on it. So we go in and we register and we go through all the things you do, and we go back, and pretty quickly, Dr. McAllister is in the room with us. And before she even examines Barbara, she says, I've looked at the mammogram and the sonogram. We'll get these other tests done right away, and I know you're waiting for something down in Asheville, but we can do them here, so we're going to do them here. And what I want you to know is that if we can do some chemotherapy and reduce the size of this tumor to half of what it is right now, I'll be able to do a lumpectomy instead of a mastectomy. I know lots of women have had mastectomy, and it's not the end of life, but there was such relief in hearing those words that it changed the whole thing for me. It's like at that moment I found God. So we spent an hour with this surgeon. And at some point, Barbara mentioned that our daughter-in-law is a pediatrician. And she said, what's the pediatrician's name? And she gave her name, Bridget Fogelman. And the doctor said, That's my kid's pediatrician. Now, I'm one from all my training in psychology that knows that things work better if you have relationships. So this is like a big one for me, and I'm thrilled. Another point in the meeting, the doctor says, so you can do your chemotherapy here, or there's a new place down in Asheville. It's called Messino Cancer Center. And we looked at each other and looked at her and said, that's a mile from our house. We'll do that. She says, okay, if you go there, then you need to have an oncologist on their staff. The other place that we had gone didn't even have an oncologist. So we say, okay. She leaves the room, comes back with an appointment for Barbara. And it's right after she finishes her scans. The next day, she'll meet with an oncologist, and she gives me a little sticky note that's got the name on it, and the name is Dr. Robb, R-A-A-B. I don't know who Dr. Robb is. So we complete with the doctor, we get everything together and organized, and we get in the car and head home. And we called Bridget, because she's been really walking us through this whole thing. She's a physician, so she knows. And we're talking, and when I told her about the doctor being, her kids being her patients, and she loved that. But apparently it's it's the father in that family that takes them. So she doesn't really know directly Dr. McAllister, but still, we've got these great connections. And I said, and we're going to have an oncologist. We're going to go to Messino. And she said, what's the doctor's name? I said, his name is Robb, R-A-A-B. And she said, that's not a he. That's Rachel, my best friend in medical school. I know. And all these little pieces, you bring them all together and something wonderful is happening. So I just want to acknowledge our practitioners, those of you in the room, those of you that are watching online, for all that good work you're doing in knowing the truth of Barbara and of me, because I'm having breakthroughs with this too. Now, I'm not suggesting everything's going to just work out hunky-dory, that there's not going to be other things to go through with this. But I can't help but realize at this point that God's in the midst of every bit of it. And then we're going to get through this. So that's the story I have to share with you today. And that's the belief in how it works. Is that when you can know the truth of who you are, you can create in your life an outcome that works for you. And that's what I'm holding to. And that's what at our meeting, which was actually held off a week, with our practitioners, is at 2 o'clock this afternoon, that we'll have the opportunity to up-level our work as well. So here's what I want to ask you, and all the people that watch this online. Not many people know about this. We held this with our staff and with our practitioners for a number of weeks. But now I've brought it out into the world. I want to encourage you not to gossip about it. Not to run home and call everybody you know that knows Barbara and tell them all that she has breast cancer. But to tell the whole story if you're going to tell it at all. Because if you don't, that's going to create something in your life that you may not like. So be clear before you share this information with anyone. Everybody. I assume I'm on center camera. Everybody. Be clear about this, because our work is to know the higher truth of all of this, that God's in the midst of it, and that all is well. Holmes is amazing in his writing. There's about half of this book is treatments. But in the introduction, the only treatment that's there, I want to share with you. Because he really demonstrates how to do this. How to know the truth. These words are so powerful to me. He writes, I am a center in the divine mind, a point of God consciousness, life, truth, and action. My affairs are divinely guided and guarded into right action, into correct results. Everything I do, say, and think is stimulated by the truth. There is power in this word that I speak because it is truth. There is perfect and continuous right action in my life and my affairs. Right action alone has power, and right action is power, and power is God, the living Spirit Almighty. This Spirit animates everything that I do, say, and think. Ideas come to me daily, and these ideas are divine ideas. They direct me and sustain me without effort. I am compelled to do the right thing at the right time, to say the right word at the right time, and to follow the right course at all times. I am happy, well, and filled with perfect life. I live in the Spirit of truth, and I am conscious that the Spirit of truth lives in me. My word is the law unto its own manifestation, and will bring to me, or cause me to be brought to it, fulfillment. I know, and I know that I know. Every thought of doubt vanishes from my mind, that I may know the truth, and the truth shall make me free. Yeah. So the truth is making us free, no matter how the facts look hard, no matter how much it looks like a struggle. And then Holmes becomes the prophet at the end of the introduction. He writes these words: a new light is coming into the world. We are on the borderland of a new experience. The veil between spirit and matter is very thin. The invisibility passes into visibility through our faith in it. A new science, a new religion, a new philosophy are rapidly being developed. This is in line with the evolution of the great presence, and nothing can hinder its progress. So join me in knowing that this is the truth, that we are on the precipice of a great change. And we may not even notice it as it's happening, but it's happening nonetheless. So know with me Barbara's perfect health, her beautifulness, her radiance, and how her body is working, no matter what. Her body is working, and that she has everything she needs to be healthy and whole in every way, right now and always. And by doing that, I promise to love you forever.
You already do.
I know. Yeah. Thank you for hearing my words today and hearing my heart. I love you. God bless you all.